Okay, so I have 10:03. We're going to get started because we do have a number of fantastic speakers this morning and guests joining us. Um, I know many of you, this is your like 1,000th webinar, but just as a reminder, we do have at the bottom of the screen the questions and answers and the chat features for you to be able to submit questions throughout today's webinar. And if you do have something you need to share, either with panelists or myself or Emery or Jim, let us know. So please make sure you're using those features so that you can communicate with us throughout the webinar. Okay, Emery. We do definitely, absolutely, ArtPride feel like it's critically important to recognize today's Juneteenth and the significance it represents in commemorating when the last enslaved people found out about the Emancipation Proclamation. I think it's really important that, and we as ArtPride, we really feel like this is a day where white and non-Black people of color should take time to reflect on systemic racism and its impact against Black people in particular. Our New Jersey arts community has certainly embraced the need for change. And although I think many of us as individuals and our organizations are at different points in our journey, I'm sure we collectively recognize the significance, the importance of the large-scale recognition that Juneteenth is receiving. So we wanted to make sure we started with that context and with that framework today. I'll pass it to Emery Miller, our fantastic Director of Public Policy and Advocacy, and I will get out of the way.
Thank you, Adam Pearl, our fantastic President and CEO. So I just wanted to share this, just saw this when we talk about Juneteenth and we talk about power and we talk about all these other values. This came up in the New York Times this morning, and I just thought it was a really powerful image in Detroit, and art can lead the way, and we hope it will. Let's see. Okay, what happened since last week? Actually 2 weeks ago, since our last webinar, the EIDL loans have opened back up after a backlog. The final PPP loan forgiveness application now has the changes from the Paycheck Flexibility Act. The SBA also introduced a great easy forgiveness application that's simple to complete. So I wanted to share this with you. The link is at the bottom. Americans for the Arts will host a free webinar on Monday, and you can register for that. And I think it's Nina Oslu-Tinchelli, who was with us a few weeks ago. She's going to guide everybody through the easy forgiveness application. Here's a brief report. You might remember a couple weeks ago we had a survey to the field asking them how they benefited from the CARES Act with regard to PPP, with regard to the EIDL, small business loans, and unemployment. So we had over 100 responses. So we had a small sample, and what I was able to do was make a comparison to what has been reported by Americans for the Arts with regard to the national numbers, and see where New Jersey falls in that regard. So this is a brief report. Vince Hall helped us put this infographic together. We'll post it on the website, but just some information, because I think this is helpful to us in the long run to show that arts groups actually are availing themselves of the opportunities that are out there with regard to the CARES funds. So what it does show you is that, for PPP, the national average is 79% of success rate, and in New Jersey, it's 87%. For the EIDL, emergency business loans, the national average of success was 40%, and New Jersey was 54%. And for unemployment, the national average, this is all Americans for the Arts national data reported, was 36%, and for New Jersey, it's 57%. So what's interesting to note also is the amounts of money. These are conservative estimates. very, very modest estimates based on our small sample size, but over $11 million in PPP, emergency loans, 629,000, and we really don't have a way of reporting the benefits, the unemployment benefits. But what you should also know is that 26 arts groups benefited from the Economic Development Authority grants, a total of $99,000. That's phase one. Phase two, we're hoping will increase that amount. There was $5 million available the first time, $45 million available the second time, and I believe that we're going to be hearing some reporting back this week on the initial grants made through phase two. Looking to the future, this is also information that was posted up on the Americans for the Arts website with regard to the New Jersey organizations that responded to their coronavirus survey. And, what's really interesting is to see that it's only, slightly over half of our organizations believe they're actually going to survive this, the impact of the virus, which is really scary. But you can see that where the major concerns are, financial concerns are, and I don't think this is, news to anybody. Those are our concerns. So what I want to do now is introduce to you our panelists today. This is a little bit different for us. And after this slide, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we're all here. Marianne Lods from the Millville Development Corporation, which is in charge of and part of the Glasstown Arts District in Millville. Samir Nichols from Superior Arts Institute in Camden. Jennifer North from the Institute of Music for Children in Elizabeth, and Aran Roche from Montclair Film in, of course, Montclair. So I want to thank them for joining us today and having this discussion, which I think is really important. You need to know that the reason for this is because through the Housing and Urban Development, HUD, the federal money, $31 million is going to New Jersey. It's a significant amount of CARES dollars going to counties and large municipalities. And I think it's important for us to know that this money is out there, and because we're all scrambling to make sure that, we take advantage of every opportunity that exists. These folks here, I want to thank them for joining us today. We've talked about this a little bit and prepared for this some. So I'm going to toss the first question out there, which is basically, how have you benefited from your municipality, either in dollars, whether it's community development block grants or other valuable services? And I'll ask first, Aran.
Hi everybody. So I'm with Montclair Film at the moment. The Township of Montclair currently provides no cash support for the organization or other cultural organizations outside the library, but we do work very closely with the township during our festival season to change the parking regulations so folks don't get tickets while at our events. So we work in partnership, which is really valuable and ends up saving us money in the long term. In the good news department, there's a new Montclair recovery plan. The town council just recently announced a new pool of funding totaling $150,000 to be distributed as 1K grants. Guidelines aren't yet available and will be first come, first served basis. It's for small businesses, home-based companies, sole proprietors, and nonprofits with less than 25 employees. So that's rolling out to help with the COVID relief. So getting back to business. So it'd be interesting to see if other towns follow suit and do similar programs. In the past, I've worked on and received Cdbg funding through Essex County. Basically grants ranging from $20,000 to $40,000, mostly for ADA renovations. So ADA bathrooms, entryways, those sorts of things, as well as access Cdbg funding through the Township of Montclair. That's more for underserved audiences and programs that serve at-risk youth and things like that. Those grants, in my experience, have ranged from $10,000 to $20,000. So in my experience, the applications are pretty straightforward. I've really found it's all about relationship building. So if you aren't yet in touch with the folks who run these programs in the county and in your town, I would simply suggest doing a Google search, figure out who you should reach out to. I've had more luck with the county in terms of the construction projects, keeping in mind it can be time consuming to go through this process. There's a bid process, you have to post public announcements. If it's a quick turn timeline kind of project, I've had situations where I've had a good project but gone for private funding just because it's been challenging to keep the project on time. The applications I've also found are relatively simple, and reporting is very much based on demographic data when dealing with social service programs. And you've got to report in order to get the payment. So again, it works in some programs really well. It's government funding, yeah. And then beyond federal funding that trickles down through HUD and the federal government, I've had a lot of success working with Essex County, their cultural agencies, Heritage, in terms of like sponsorship for outdoor summer series, whether it's really in-kind support. Sometimes they'll help support, in-kind donation of porta potties and lights that are required for outdoor spaces in county parks. They'll give in-kind use of site fees and things like that. In some cases, they'll even support some of the hard costs for things like outdoor screens for a summer series and things like that. So it's always worth talking about ways to partner in order to access funds that may not be formally publicized and things like that. So that's kind of where, in my experience in Montclair with local organizations, has tapped some government support.
Marianne?
Yes, good morning. We've partnered and gotten support with our city, no cash for the last few years. However, they do pay the utilities for the Public Arts Center building, and that's where our office for administration is as well. We also, the city also does our trash pickup, maintains heating, air conditioning in public buildings and so forth. Our county, we have support through the tourism board, and we get marketing grants through our county government. We also partner and get assistance from the Cumberland County Improvement Authority. They're the economic development agent for our county officially, and they have millions and millions of dollars in projects going on throughout the county in all 3 cities and even in the township areas. But they particularly help in our arts district with projects that will, for instance, bring more people downtown, new jobs. 5 years ago, I think it is now, they built a downtown campus for our community college, which is also part of Rowan College as of last year. So there's a great deal of support from our county economic agencies. We too get Cdbg funding, but ours is through our city, not the county. And we use ours currently for facade improvements to the buildings. Small grants of $2,000, which can pay for paint and awnings, a new window, new doors, whatever comes of need of most of the businesses eventually. So that's it for now until we get some more discussion.
Okay, Jennifer.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Before I go through my local funding, I just want to point out that in the spirit of Juneteenth, government funding really is an equity conversation. And as development professionals, as we're moving into these networks and as we're representing our organizations to government agencies, it's important that we're cognizant of like what lane that we're all in. So in the foundation world, as a white professional working for a Black-led organization, there are a lot of challenges. There are different challenges in government funding, and it's really important for us to recognize that as we're building relationships. So all of these funding streams start with relationships. We'll be talking about that, I think, a little bit later. But to answer the question directly, we get both, and I'm at the Institute of Music for Children. We are in Elizabeth, so we are a neighbor to Newark, right on the border of Union and Essex counties. So we get CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funding from both the City of Elizabeth and from Union County. We serve about 80% low to moderate income children. So, and we document that really carefully. So the CDBG funds come down from HUD. It's federal funding that comes through the either county or municipality. There's a lot of paperwork that's required if you're depending on what you're receiving funds for. We get social service funding that is different than emergency service grants and capital grants. So our programs are funded, our teaching artists are funded through the CDBG, both through the county and through the town of Elizabeth. There's a competitive process each year for that. We also get funding from the Union County Youth Service Commission. We get funding from Newark Arts for our in-school Newark residencies, which is, I think, an agency that's loosely connected to the local government. Anne-Marie can probably correct that. We get funding, a small funding from the Union County Office of Cultural and Heritage Affairs. So most of these are small funding streams, anywhere from $2,200 up to our county funding, which is almost $50,000. Most of it is reimbursable funding, so we have to put the dollars out first and demonstrate with a lot of rigor exactly what they're reimbursing for. And one area that I want to mention as we're talking about community institutions is don't forget about the church community and the religious community. It's not government funding, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but there are institutional structures that are local, county, regional, and national that can help to fund organizations that are providing services, especially if you're working in a vulnerable community. And it's similar structures as with government and with foundations as well. So that's an institutional system that you can potentially break into for funding as well.
Excellent. Just a question was about links to the cities and towns. We will share a link on HUD where you can find out if your town is getting specific funding. And Samir.
Hello, everyone. So I just want to start out by saying thank you to everyone for having me here today. I agree with, and I'm going to piggyback off of somewhat with all of my fellow panelists are saying. It is a very rigorous process applying for these dollars, as they do trickle down from the federal government. Most of us, when we apply for these dollars, go in with the intent that with our hearts and not with our actual, I want to say, not with the intent behind the goodness of our projects. And what I'm saying by that is, when we apply for these dollars, it is a very, very, very competitive process with a lot of reporting, like Jennifer said. But the other part of that is being a part of the conversations that happens before. So in Superior Arts, we don't directly receive funding from our CBDG dollars. We receive state funding community service block grant dollars, which are a little bit similar, which we're going to talk about later in this presentation. However, on the local level, there is something called the consolidation planning process. And in order for us in Camden to even receive our dollars or through CBDG, we have to first get our city officials to insert language in our consolidation plan that will allow us to apply. So like many of the, unlike a difference in South Jersey that North Jersey has, is that they already had that consolidation language in their they had the language placed in their consolidation plans, ultimately leaving them in a better position. So we're in that ground level zero, working to get to that here. But what our local and county government has done has placed the public service dollars, or social service dollars rather, inside of our Department of Human Services, allowing the organizations to access very, very smaller portions of the funding through both the county events department, right? Our county events department does a lot of countywide events that are free for our residents. And you'll see them in different forms, art festivals and different wine derbies that have aspects of theater, right? So you won't see them in a traditional form of a theater company being directly applying and getting those funding. Another part is on the city level, ensuring that you work with planning officials and your planning directors, because that's very important. So just to circle back around our awards, no, we don't receive those direct awards now, but we have access to those awards through other channels. And so, Jennifer, you said something in reference to the emergency assistance. When you go in there and you see that application and you see that it says emergency assistance for these things, that's where you need to be looking into public facility improvements and facades. So we have explored those options here. And I think we're going to talk more about that in the presentation. But when you apply for that funding, making sure that your projects are fitting that consolidated plan and ensuring that you fit into that. So hopefully next year I'll be coming back and saying we have got CBDG dollars, or we will have them for public service projects, but right now we don't.
Okay, and interesting that Jen mentioned Newark. Actually, Newark Arts re-grants State Arts Council funding. However, the city of Newark pulled together $750,000 that they put into a creative innovation program that's administered through the city, and it's for individual arts organizations as well as artists. So you do not have to be a 501c3 to take advantage of that funding, and they're just starting to roll that out right now. Mm-hmm. All right, so who are the best people to reach out to begin to form these relationships, especially if you're starting from scratch? Marianne.
Okay, we mentioned some of the agencies, but I want to stress that your city planner and your city and county economic development director are very important contacts to a lot of our nonprofit organizations. So, look them up and do a little research. If you don't know them, make sure you get to meet them. We also use our New Jersey Main Street program and part of National Main Street. I believe now there are 25 Main Streets in the state. I hope that some of your towns do belong to that. We get a lot of valuable help from them, usually not dollars, although last year they had excess funds when the budget was starting to wind down. And so they made available improvement monies. So we created 3 new murals from ours and renovated our public plaza, which is a performance space often. So, just networking with them if you have it in your town or in the town next to you. You never know how that might turn out. So that's it for now.
Jen?
Thank you, Emery. I always recommend starting with existing allies you have that already have credibility established. Even if they're not in your sector, they know, they have people in their networks and decision makers, and they can often connect you either directly or indirectly with the right people. So I always start there. I come from a marketing background and I approach fundraising similarly. So I get to know my market, right? We serve youth. If you serve elderly, it's a totally different group of people. So who are the decision makers in your local town, in your county, and each of our target audiences, right? Whether we're talking about people with disabilities or we're talking about children, or we're talking about elderly or intergenerational work, there are parallel agencies within your sector. So within youth in particular, county youth programming directors, town youth programming director, the youth service commissions in your counties, any youth advisory council or teen advisory councils that your mayor might have or that your council might have, community economic development boards, planning boards, recreation boards, the mayor, the school board, council members, your assembly people, anyone who can champion your work. And I would suggest inviting them to your events, getting to know them. And when they know you, it's much easier. They will help you. Our state funders have been hugely valuable in connecting us with local folks, and having having our state agencies vouch for us shows our local funder, the local people, that we really are making a difference and that we're making an impact that they should note. So who are your champions already, your third-party endorsers, those who can, vouch for your impact. The data counts, storytelling also counts. So if you serve elderly adults, especially through HUD funding and CDBG funding, you don't have to provide the same level of documentation and paperwork for elderly adults, for example, as you do when you're serving youth. So there are different processes, and getting to know your field, your sector, your competitors, and the activists who are supporting your particular niche is really helpful. So understanding that landscape, and really just, again, like with any relationships in any fundraising, starting with your strongest relationships and then building out and getting people to come on site, not just when you need funding at that moment, but starting at the beginning. Samir mentioned the planning process in Camden, the consolidation plans. All of our funding from government, whether it's youth service, whether it's county heritage, whether it's CDBG, those are all governed by plans. And as funded agencies and as non-funded community agencies and as community members, these are open meetings that happen annually. And they're not at the same time. Even within CDBG, Union Counties is different than the timing for Elizabeth's. But getting involved in those planning processes, and they break down within youth even, the County Youth Service Commission for us, they have prevention, they have diversion, they have 3 or 4 different working groups. So we participate in the prevention conversations as they're creating their priorities. So being part of that conversation is very useful. And coming in just before a deadline can be challenging, especially with the rigor that some of these applications require. The last thing I want to say is that there usually is, I know this sounds a little scary for people not already getting government funding, but there really is a lot of technical support that these agencies provide. They always have a mandatory meeting before application time. They often have open Q&As or multiple webinars that are part of it. And just like at the State Arts Council, the program officers, or they're not called that, but your staffing for the agencies are tremendously helpful, and they are willing to help you usually up until the day of. So the technical assistance you can get is really, really valuable. I encourage everyone to seek help when they need it for these applications.
Thank you. Samir.
So just to directly answer the question, for your local leaders, you would want to talk to your mayor on a local level, or your town advisor, whoever the chief executive officer of that municipality is. I know it varies for the town, according to census or whatever it is that they got that far. So that's on a local level. You want to meet with your planning officials who actually go through the consolidation plan, because they then submit the language to the administration for their city council to approve. And like Jennifer said, every single dollar that you get through the government is connected to some bigger ultimate plan, whether it's a strategic plan that lasts for 5 years, whether it's a neighborhood plan, or any other plan or any other funding in that sector is connected to an ultimate bigger plan. So if you're on your county level, most county governments are governed by the freeholder board. So if your board of chosen freeholders ultimately are submitting their consolidation plan. On a state level, we receive community service block grants, as I mentioned before. There are currently conversations that are happening that I am currently taking a part of on the state that are happening for them to submit their 5-year consolidation plan. So which will be sent out in a link today. When you think about who you should be working with, you should be reaching out to your Parks and Recs director, because a lot of what we do in the arts are open air. You should be reaching out, as Jennifer mentioned, the prevention piece of this is a major aspect to all organizations, arts organizations directly, because a lot of the work that we do is preventative care on a secondary level. So yeah, we don't provide direct care and making sure that our families are in the court systems or whatever other systems that are associated with, those ideology, but what we are directly involved with is preventing them from being in that delinquent behavior or conducting it, right? So we directly can work with those agencies, as Jennifer said, on prevention money. We received prevention dollars from a local advocacy council in Camden County and our Juvenile Justice Commission, right? Because they're all about prevention. So there are other dollars that are out there on a local level, that you just have to know how to connect with those agencies, your Juvenile Justice Commission leaders or their executive directors, Office of Faith-Based Initiatives. You want to reach out to those, not program officers per se, but they are, just like Jen said, different staffers in that office to build relationships with. One of the things that was mentioned earlier is you want to go to your town leadership, whether it's your council or whomever, and have those private and public conversations at their podiums, letting them know that it's not like I'm demanding this, but this is almost required for our community as we see economic development happening. You want to go and talk about an arts trust or arts bonding in your community with your council people to be able to generate revenue, like Hoboken. Hoboken did, the mayor did the arts bond that generates over $1 million in revenue. That was done because local artists were performing art installations, and he realized the need to take away graffiti in his community was so strong that he worked with them to build a coalition, and with 1% of the earning from the development that was happening allowed them to slur an arts trust, leading now $1 million fund for artists in Hoboken. I would love to see what that looks like post-COVID. So in closing, once you meet with your local, state, and federal officials, and I mean, as there is a lot of technical assistance. When we got our CDBG dollars, community service block grant dollars, I did not know about half of the required documents that, and I mean, I've started my organization when I was 14. I did not know about half of what we should have had in line. And literally our rep, shout out the Department of Community Affairs and the Lieutenant Governor, they walked us through each and every step of the documentation until we got in compliance, and then said, we're issuing a contract. It was even, I can recall there being language that needed to be changed, and they called and asked for modifications the day after it was submitted, right? So it is concepts and there is relationship there. But I think we as those leaders need to put down our artistic hat for just a smidge, right? And actually throw on that artistic, that executive hat and go in with the tough conversation about our programming.
Perfect. Aran.
So here in Essex County, I've worked with staff from the Essex County Department of Housing and Community Development. The point of contact in the past has been the program director, the director of finance. They've been very open in the past from a phone call just to have a one-on-one meeting, start the conversation, see what funding is available, talk about timeframes. And again, talking to freeholders and other connections, like really always engaging with all of the contacts that all of the panelists have mentioned is really the place to start. Coming in cold, it's challenging because people in the know tend to be in the know and get the funding. So starting those conversations and making time for the one-on-one guidance is really helpful. I've found the program staff are very willing to spend time. In Montclair, the Cdbg program was run through the planning department again, and they put about 1/3 of all of their funding. I think they get about $300,000 in recent years, and about 1/3 of that goes to nonprofits. So, and again, that's for financial literacy programs, programs to lift people out of poverty, mentoring, preventing homelessness, helping families escape domestic violence, job training, closing educational gaps. Those are the kinds of programs. So what I'd like to do always is just look at who's gotten funding in the past and talk to your peers, really reach out to folks who've gotten these grants in the past. Like I said, they're competitive. And again, you'll very often see the same usual suspects getting funded because they know the system. But, talk to folks who are getting the funding. Many of them you'll find will be willing to have the conversation.
So we have a question for Jennifer. Thanks, Aran. From Jonathan at Cap and Carry. Does Jennifer believe that speaking to community foundations that are providing support are people that can be used as references with local government officials?
I think that depends on the community foundation. I've found the culture of, and maybe your experience might be different, Emery, you might be able to weigh in here. I find the culture at community foundations to be extremely varied within themselves. So it depends on the community foundation. If it's made up of people who are going to public meetings and also involved in their faith-based communities and involved in, and many of these folks are, right, whether it's officially through their foundation or just as a citizen within that community. So I would say, yeah, I would say don't ever hesitate to ask anyone you know for an introduction. And you can find a way to do that that feels right and authentic to you. People want to help because what we're doing makes a difference and makes an impact and improves quality of life. And having arts organizations be successful is win-win for everyone. So I don't see it as a burden. I think you should ask everyone who they know, who should we know, who should we be talking to. Anytime you can introduce us to anyone or invite us to participate in a stakeholder group, we are interested in getting our name and our impact and program out there. So I would never be shy about that. Most likely they will be able to. It most likely, I'm guessing, would be informal. And probably the other panelists could also weigh in. I'm sure that everybody here gets some
I would love to.
funding from community foundations.
I would love to. So as a part of growing, we understand the funding need for all organizations is collaboration, right? So it is extremely important that if you feel that urge, you should reach out to that person, because then a program can be not duplicated, but you guys could possibly partner on a project, and that'll be your shoe in the door, right? So if that person's already receiving funding, they're looking at, continuing their funding stream essentially. And so if you guys come in with a new innovative project, it's another pipeline for the funder to understand the need. So don't be hesitant in reaching out, because I think that that's the most important thing. And most organizations right now, as we all know, the new age, we're screaming for collaborations to keep our budget lines relevant. So please reach out. Don't be scared. Do it. It's going to help you in the long run, and it's going to be mutually beneficial to you to make the connection. And I think that the person that you're connecting to connect you, it will be extremely beneficial to their funder to see that you are willing to continue the relevant conversation in their community.
Perfect. So
I'll just add one quick thing. The community foundations often have donor advised funds and individual donors. So remember, they're representing voters and people who donate to political campaigns. So if you think about it that way, it makes a lot of sense for those partnerships to happen as you're approaching legislators. So just be smart and strategic about it.
It's important.
I didn't hear that, Aaron. I didn't hear that. That wasn't. I'm not on that.
So it's important to remember that everything is interconnected. Right. And then to follow up on Aran's point about face-to-face meetings, any ideas on first steps now that we're in COVID era?
Well, I have an idea for that, because most of us are involved with group meetings, whether through other nonprofits like ArtPride or others within your own community, your own county. Time to jump on board before these disappear. And your introduction may be for the first time through a county planning meeting or a county development meeting or what have you, or an arts meeting for the cultural and heritage group. So when we go back to whatever we're going back to, some kind of normal, follow up with in-person meetings and appointments and, written thank yous and so forth.
Great. So my last question is there a specific timeline for beginning the process? And is it calendar year? How do we have to look at the calendar or just let's start now?
It's Marianne again. So I think the fiscal dates are important, but a lot of organizations go by calendar year. So you need to look at the whole spectrum and see when budgets are developed and published. So you need to check on all of that before you go ahead and make your plan of whom you're going to approach and when.
From my experience, I found applications for Cdbg funding become available in December, and they're often due in Essex County and Montclair, at least in early to mid-November. with some in-person public hearings being required before the formal submission in December, and then funding is approved for the following year. It's very often you can only find past year's information. It happens very, very quickly. So the time to get started is yesterday, like anything with funding, but really just dive in and start talking to folks and see what your local timing looks like. I think it may vary.
Okay, so I want to thank you all so much for being part of this today. I'm going to try to share my screen again. We're not done yet, Jim, but let's see. There's a poll up there. Let me see if I can do this again.
I was going to say it's over already?
No, we're not done. We're not done yet. Let's see. I'm going to try because, of course, screen sharing never seems to happen smoothly. But if it's okay with all of you, what I'd like to do is share your email addresses as new resources, okay, for everybody. Also some just pointers here, the links, and we'll have this, you know, again in the notes for how your CDBG contacts are. There's a link in HUD where you can go specifically to New Jersey. And of course, here we go again. Let's try again. No, it's not gonna want me to advance, but we have a couple of other links that show you exactly where to go to find out how much money your town is receiving in CARES funding. Let's see, I wanna just point out, and thanking everybody for being part of this today, that this is now, you know, really important for you to understand that an email to your legislators is not enough. You really have to get involved and understand who runs government and how you can be involved in a personal level, getting to know these people and becoming part of the process. It's really important to do now while we have a little bit of time, while some of the groups are closed. And I also want to let you know that we're working with the State Arts Council on a Mayor's Committee of Arts and Culture. So we'll be looking to gather mayors first in an advisory capacity to talk about how they can share some of the examples of what they're doing on a local level with the arts groups, and how funding can become more available on a local level. Last thing I wanted to do was to remind you, if you hadn't gotten enough you know, webinars, following ours at 11 o'clock is a webinar on a Friday morning with the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. And they have many resources that intersect with our work on a local level, especially in terms of the preventative strategies that Samir was talking about. So I encourage you, it's hcdnnj.org. Check them out. And I want to thank everybody for being part of this
And just
today.
Go
ahead, Samir.
While Ann was on the topic, I also wanted to include next week, or right now they're taking submissions for the state's consolidation plan. And that's like, so that you can send the questions in today. Like I'm literally emailing while we're on this webinar, like questions to them that specific language I want in the plan, right? Like you got to do that, you know?
Sounds good.
All right. Emery, you want to try and bring that up, or we're good?
I'm trying.
I know.
I know.
Trying.
No,
All right. Well, I also wanted to echo my appreciation for everyone who spent their time this morning, our panelists, in addition to all the folks on the phone. I mean, not on the phone, on the meeting. And we will definitely be in touch. ArtPride will certainly be in touch with our next webinar date. Keep an eye out for that. And please keep your eyes open, as Emery had said, for all things ArtPride related. Thanks again. And I will also say a happy Father's Day to all the fathers and grandfathers out there celebrating. So thanks again.
Same to you, Adam, and Jim,
thanks.
and and everybody listening. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good day.